The obsidian walls of the grand synod chamber seemed to absorb the light of the binary stars hanging in the viewports, drinking in the radiance of the cosmos, and returning only a cold, mirrored reflection of the ancient beings gathered within. It was a silence that possessed mass, a heavy, suffocating gravity that pressed against the spiraling chitin and ceremonial robes of the High Council. Dust motes, suspended in the anti-gravitic fields that maintained the chamber's perfect stasis, caught the crimson light of the dying sun, looking like suspended droplets of blood. High Archon Vales sat upon the throne of whispers, his multifaceted eyes twitching with a nervous energy that betrayed the stoic immobility of his carapace. For 10,000 cycles, the Ethelgard Dominion had ruled the Inner Rim, a hegemony built on the absolute certainty that they were the apex of biological and technological evolution, the final answer to the chaotic equation of the universe. They were the gardeners of the galaxy, pruning the unruly weeds of younger civilizations, ensuring that order, rigid, stifling, beautiful order, prevailed over the entropy of the void. But today, the silence of the chamber was not the silence of contemplation. It was the silence of a predator realizing, for the first time in an epoch, that it might be prey. The holographic projection in the center of the room, a swirling vortex of data and sensor ghosts, depicted the unthinkable. They were coming. Not with the thunder of warp drives that tore the fabric of reality, nor with the aggressive posturing of weapon arrays charged to capacity, but with a terrifying, silent slide through the subspace currents, moving with a grace that defied the brute force physics the Dominion understood. Vales clicked his mandibles, a sound that echoed like a cracking bone in the vast, vaulted hall. The other counselors, representatives of the thrall species that bowed to the Ethelgard, shifted uneasily. There was Calith of the aquatic Hydron Concord, floating in her suspension tank, her bioluminescent tendrils flashing colors of distress, deep violets and frantic grays. There was General Rax of the Molt, a hulking creature of rock-like hide and volcanic temperament, who for once looked small against the backdrop of the projection. They had all said it was impossible. The theoretical physicists of the High Synod had written treatises, spanning libraries of data crystals, proving that the Orion Arm was a dead zone, a stellar graveyard where radiation tides and gravitational anomalies made organized civilization impossible. They called it the Abyssal Cradle. No signal ever came out. No probe ever returned. It was the edge of the map, the dragon-filled void where the Dominion's cartographers simply wrote entropy. And yet, from that chaotic dark, a signal had pierced the silence 3 cycles ago. It was not a scream of war, nor a plea for mercy. It was a greeting. A mathematical constant broadcast on all frequencies, so simple, so elegant, and so terrifyingly calm that it had frozen the Dominion's defense grids in sheer confusion. The humans, they called themselves humans. The name tasted like ash in Vales's mouth, soft, formless, unarmored. "Report," Vales commanded, his voice a low thrum that vibrated through the floor plates. "Do not give me speculation, give me certainty. The Dominion thrives on certainty." The irony was not lost on him. Certainty was the very thing currently disintegrating around them. Sub-Overseer Nix, a slender avian technician whose species served as the Dominion's eyes and ears, stepped forward, her feathers ruffled in agitation. She manipulated the light controls with trembling talons. "High Archon," she began, her voice oscillating with fear. "The readings remain contradictory. The approaching vessel has decelerated. It sits just beyond the perimeter of the Othri's defense net. Our scanners indicate it is massive, Archon. The scale is difficult to convey without direct comparison, but it eclipses our dreadnoughts. Yet its energy signature is quiet, almost background noise. It generates no waste heat. It emits no tachyon exhaust. If we did not have visual confirmation, the sensors would claim it is empty space." Vales leaned forward, the joints of his ancient armor grinding. "Stealth technology? A cloak?" Nix shook her head, a frantic, jerky motion. "No, Archon, it is not hiding. It is simply efficient, perfectly efficient. Thermodynamics dictates that energy must be lost, that entropy must increase. But this ship, it ignores the bleed. It is a closed loop of perfect energy retention. It is impossible." General Rax slammed a fist onto his console, shattering a pane of glass data. "Impossible is a word for the weak," he roared, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "It is a trick. They mask their heat to hide their weapons. No species evolves without the drive to conquer. If they are here to take. I say we fire the single. Arity cannons. We burn them before they cross the threshold. We do not wait for the diplomatic lies of a predator." Vales raised a hand, silencing the general. "And if they are not predators, Rax? Or worse, if they are predators that have evolved beyond the need for teeth?" The Archon looked back at the hologram. The human ship was sleek, a teardrop of silver metal that seemed to reflect the stars around it so perfectly that it vanished into the background. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no bridge towers. It was a monolith of smooth geometry. They requested audience, Valles mused, more to himself than the council. They did not demand surrender. They did not demand resources. They asked to speak, and they used high Valosian to do it. That had been the most chilling detail. The transmission had been in the court language of the Ethelgard, a dialect spoken only by the elite, a language that hadn't left the inner sanctum in 4,000 years. How had they learned it? How long had they been watching from the dark of the abyssal cradle? We cannot deny them, Kalith's synthesized voice bubbled from her tank, wet and resonant. If they possess the technology to traverse the cradle and the stealth to arrive undetected until they chose to be seen, the singularity cannons may be as effective as throwing stones at a supernova. We must know what they are. We must know how they survived the dead zone. Curiosity, Rax, is a survival trait just as much as aggression. Valles settled back into the throne. He felt the weight of history pressing on his shoulders. The prophecy of the Golden Path stated that the Ethelgard would rule until the stars burned out. It said nothing of visitors from the dark. "Open the comms," Valles ordered, the decision settling over the room like a shroud. "Low the defense grid to standby. Do not power down weapons, but do not lock targets. Let us see the face of the impossible." The transition was seamless. The hologram flickered, the swirling data vortex vanishing to be replaced by a live feed from the bridge of the human vessel. The council held its breath. They expected a warrior in power armor, scarred and cybernetic. They expected a hive-mind avatar, pulsating with biological horror. They expected a cold machine intelligence. Instead, the image resolved to show a room that looked less like a command center and more like a library. Soft, warm light, completely unlike the harsh antiseptic glow of Dominion ships, bathed the space. There were shelves, actual physical shelves, lined with paper books, a medium the Ethelgard had abandoned millennia ago. Plants, green and vibrant, grew in containers along the walls. And in the center, standing not behind a podium but sitting comfortably in a simple chair, was a creature of alarming fragility. It had soft skin, pale and unarmored. It had tufts of hair on its head. It wore fabric clothes that looked woven, not fabricated. It had 2 eyes, forward-facing, predator eyes, yes, but they were filled with a terrifying calmness. "Greetings, High Archon Valles," the human said. The voice was melodic, modulated perfectly to the acoustic range of the Ethelgard hearing organs. "I am Ambassador Elias Thorne. I represent the Terran Coalition. We thank you for accepting our hail. It has been a long journey and we have much to discuss." Valles felt a chill run through his hemolymph. The human knew his name. "You speak our tongue, alien," Valles replied, forcing his voice to remain steady, projecting the authority of 10,000 years. "You entered Dominion space uninvited. You crossed the veil of silence, a feat that physics dictates should kill any biological entity. You arrive in a ship that defies our sensors. Explain yourself. Are you an invasion force, or are you a lost fleet-seeking sucker?" Elias Thorne smiled. It was a gesture Valles found deeply unsettling. It showed teeth, a sign of aggression in many species, yet the muscles around the eyes suggested amusement, warmth. "We are neither Archon," Thorne said gently. "We are neighbors. We have lived in the abyssal cradle, what we call the Orion Spur, for our entire history. We were told by the few fragmented transmissions we could catch from your borders that we were alone, that the galaxy was hostile, that we would never leave our gravity well, but we are a stubborn species. We did not like being told what we could not do." The human paused, leaning forward slightly. "We are not here to invade Valles. We are here because we detected a dissonance in the galactic substrate, a tremor. We believe your civilization is in danger, and we believe we are the only ones who can help you fix it." General Rax laughed, a harsh, grinding sound. "Danger? The Dominion is absolute. We control the stars. We harness the power of black holes. You, a soft-fleshed upstart from the dead zone, come to help us? This is arrogance beyond measure." Thorne did not flinch. He did not look at Rax with anger. He looked at him with patience, the way a parent looks at a tantruming child. "The Arithmancer star," Thorne said quietly. The room went deathly silent. Rax stopped laughing. Valles went rigid. The Arithmancer star was the central power hub of the Dominion capital sector. It was a stabilized red giant enclosed in a Dyson swarm of energy collectors. It was the beating heart of their empire, and it was a state secret that the star was failing. "The harmonic resonance of the star is degrading," Thorne continued, reading from a small tablet in his hand as if discussing the weather. "Our long-range interferometry detected the wobble 40 standard years ago, By our calculations, the containment field will collapse in roughly 3 months. When it does, the resulting coronal mass ejection will sterilize this system. We assumed initially that you knew, that you were evacuating, but as we got closer, we saw no evacuation fleet. We saw only silence. We realized you were trying to fix it and failing. Valles felt the air leave his spiracles. It was true. The High Science Directorate had been working in secret for a decade to stabilize the star. Every attempt had failed. They were facing extinction, and they had been too proud to admit it to their subjects, let alone an outsider. How? Valles whispered. How could you know this? The data is encrypted at the quantum level. We didn't hack your data, Archon, Thorne said apologetically. We just looked at the star. The math is universal. The symptoms are clear if you know where to look. We developed stellar stabilization tech to survive in our home sector. Our sun was temperamental. We learned to calm it. We can calm yours. The implications hung in the air like a guillotine blade. These humans, these soft, unarmored creatures from the primitive dark, possessed technology that the Ethelgard, the masters of the galaxy, considered theoretical magic. And the price? Valles asked, his voice hard. There's always a price. You want territory? You want us to bow? Thorne shook his head. No territory, no bowing. We just want to dock. We want to share a meal. And we want to talk about the signal coming from the Andromeda Void. But first, let us fix the star. We have engineering teams standing by. They are eager to work with your scientists. We have heard great things about Ethelgard theoretical physics. We think we can learn from each other. The screen cut to black, leaving the council in the dim red light of the chamber. For a long moment, no one spoke. The concept of altruism on a planetary scale was foreign to the Dominion. Alliances were transactional. Protection was bought with servitude. This offer broke every rule of politics they knew. It is a trap, Rax growled, though his conviction was waning. They will disable the star, not fix it. They will hold us hostage. Calith's tank bubbled. Or, she said softly, they are exactly what they say they are. And if we refuse, we die in 3 months regardless. The logic dictates compliance, Archon. We have no choice. Valles looked at his hands, the chitin old and scarred. He had ruled through fear and absolute power. Now he was being offered salvation by a ghost. Prepare the docking spire, Valles commanded, his voice sounding older than he felt. And alert the Science Directorate. Tell them guests are coming. And tell the guards to stand down. If they wanted to kill us, they could have let the sun do it for them. The arrival of the human delegation was a spectacle that would be etched into the archives of Othries forever. The human ship, which they called the Aesir, did not dock in the traditional sense. It merely extended a shimmering bridge of hard light that connected to the spire's primary airlock. The physics of the bridge were baffling to the Dominion engineers. It felt solid, yet it had no mass. It was projected matter, a technology the Ethelgard had abandoned as unstable centuries ago, yet here it was, stable enough to walk on. High Archon Valles stood at the airlock, flanked by his honor guard, towering warriors in ceremonial armor that amplified their size and intimidation factor. He wanted to project power. He wanted to show these humans the majesty of the Dominion. But when the airlock hissed open, the dynamic shifted instantly. Ilias Thorne walked out first, flanked not by soldiers, but by a diverse group of humans in practical jumpsuits. Some carried instruments, others carried cases. There were no weapons. There were no energy shields. They walked with a casual confidence that was more intimidating than any army. Thorne bowed, a clumsy imitation of the Ethelgard deep crouch, but the effort was noted. High Archon, Thorne said, extending a hand, a human gesture of greeting. It is an honor to breathe your air. Valles stared at the hand. He knew the gesture from the historical databases of pre-spaceflight civilizations. He hesitated, then extended his own clawed manipulator. T. Human's grip was firm, warm, and shockingly strong for such a soft creature. Welcome to Othries, Valles said, the words feeling strange. You claim you can save our star. My scientists are skeptical. They say the core destabilization is irreversible. A woman standing behind Thorne stepped forward. She was small, with dark hair tied back in a severe bun and eyes that scanned the room with voracious intensity. With respect, Archon, she said, her voice sharp and clear, entropy is only irreversible if you treat time as a linear constraint. Dr. Aris Thorne, lead astrophysicist, your scientists are trying to plug the leak with matter. We intend to stitch it with gravity. She tapped a device on her wrist, and a hologram of the sun appeared between them. We're going to inject a localized singularity into the photosphere. It will act as a pacemaker for the star's magnetic field. It's a bit like heart surgery, but loud. The casual way she spoke of manipulating singularities, the most destructive force known to the Dominion, made General Rax step back involuntarily. Madness, Rax muttered. You will destroy us all. Eris looked at the general, her expression softening. We've done it 6 times, General. We're actually quite good at it. The first time was terrifying. The 6th time is just engineering. The next week was a blur of activity that dismantled the Ethelguard's understanding of the universe. The humans worked with a speed and fluidity that baffled the rigid, hierarchical Dominion scientists. The aliens were used to forms, approvals, councils, and protocols. The humans just worked. They argued, they improvised, they drew diagrams on the walls, they drank copious amounts of a stimulant liquid they called coffee, and they treated the Ethelguard technicians not as subordinates but as equals. At first, the Dominion scientists were insulted. Then they were intrigued. Finally, they were swept up in the infectious energy of the humans. For the first time in centuries, the labs of Authries echoed not with the chanting of rote procedures, but with heated debates about quantum mechanics and excited shouts of discovery. Valles watched it all from the observation deck, a silent specter haunting his own palace. He saw his people, who had been stagnant for an era, coming alive. He saw young Ethelguard researchers who had been taught to never question their elders, eagerly pointing out flaws in the human equations and the humans thanking them for it. It was chaos. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. If the humans succeeded, the Dominion could never go back to what it was. The myth of Ethelguard supremacy would be shattered. But as he watched the Aesir move into position above the sun, a tiny speck against the raging inferno, he realized that supremacy was a poor substitute for survival. The procedure began at the high cycle. The entire system watched. The human ship deployed a device, a small, unassuming sphere of black metal. It dropped into the star. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sun convulsed. The light turned a terrifying violet. Alarms screamed across the planet. General Rax roared for the defense grid to fire, convinced this was the end, but Valles held up his hand. "Wait," he whispered. "Look at the data." The screens, which had been showing the erratic, jagged lines of a dying star, suddenly smoothed. The violet light faded, replaced by the steady, golden-orange glow of a healthy main-sequence star. The magnetic turbulence, which had been tearing the system apart invisibly, flatlined into a perfect harmonic rhythm. The star was singing. "It is stabilized," Nyx whispered, her feathers trembling. "Efficiency 100%. The star has been rejuvenated. It will burn for another billion years." Silence reclaimed the chamber, but this time it was not heavy. It was the stunned silence of a miracle. The humans had not just fixed the engine, they had tuned it. That evening a banquet was held. It was an awkward affair. The Ethelguard did not typically dine with other species. Their food was chemically incompatible with humans, so the humans brought their own supplies, but they sat at the great obsidian tables and mimicked the rituals of the Dominion. Thorn sat beside Valles. The tension had shifted. It was no longer fear of invasion, it was the fear of the unknown future. "You have done the impossible," Valles said, his voice low. "You have saved the Empire. By our laws, we owe you a life debt, a debt that cannot be repaid. You are now the masters of this house, effectively." Thorn set down his glass of water. "We don't want to be masters, Valles. We had masters once. We didn't like it. We nearly destroyed ourselves getting free of them, not aliens, but our own worst impulses. We don't want subjects. We want partners." Valles studied the human. "Why?" he asked. "You are powerful. You are advanced. You could rule this galaxy. Why come here with open hands?" Thorn's expression grew. Ryu's, the playful, casual demeanor vanished, replaced by a weight that seemed to age him decades in a second. "Because of the signal," Thorn said softly. "The one I mentioned, from Andromeda." Valles stiffened. "The great silence. We have listened to the void between galaxies for eons. There is nothing there." "There is," Thorn corrected, "but it's not a transmission you can hear with radio or subspace. It's a gravitational wake. Something is moving through the dark between the galaxies, something massive. We call it the tide." Thorn tapped the table, and a small holographic projector sprang to life. It showed the local cluster of galaxies. Between the Milky Way and Andromeda, there was a distortion, a shadow. "We found an ancient listening post in the abyssal cradle, left by someone who was here long before you and long before us. They called themselves the Custodians. They left a warning. The tide is a swarm, a consuming force that strips galaxies of high-energy matter. It eats stars, Valles, it eats civilizations, and it's heading for us." Valles felt a cold horror grip his hearts. The political squabbles, the pride of the Dominion, the borders, and the fleets, all of it suddenly felt microscopic. "And you came to us." "We are strong," Thorn said, "but we are few. We spent thousands of years mastering the art of survival, hiding in our little corner of space, building up our tech, learning to be quiet, learning to fix stars so we wouldn't have to expand and make noise. But we realized we can't fight the tide alone. We need numbers. We need the industrial capacity of the Dominion. We need your fleets, your logistics, your billions of minds. We have the tech to upgrade your ships, to shield your worlds, to hide us all or fight if we must. But we can't do it if you're dead. And we can't do it if we're enemies. Valles looked around the room. He saw Rax talking to a human marine, comparing scars. He saw Calith discussing fluid dynamics with a human engineer. He saw the potential for something greater than the sum of its parts. They said cooperation was the weapon of the weak, Valles mused. That the strong stand alone. The strong stand together, Thorn corrected gently. That is the lesson humanity learned the hard way. We almost wiped ourselves out proving we were strong. Now we just want to survive. And we want you to survive with us. The alliance was not formed in a day. It took months of grueling negotiation, cultural friction, and the overcoming of millennia of prejudice. But the star burned bright and steady in the sky, a daily reminder of what the humans offered. The Aesir opened its databanks, and the technological leap the Dominion experienced was dizzying. Human engineers retrofitted the Ethelgard dreadnoughts with point singularity projectors and phase-shift hulls. In return, the Dominion opened its vast resource reserves, its star charts, and its disciplined military manpower to the Coalition. The two species were opposites in almost every way. The Ethelgard were rigid, stoic, and obsessed with order. Humans were chaotic, emotional, and obsessed with innovation. But they fit together like a key in a lock. The Ethelgard provided the structure, the humans provided the spark. 2 years later, the test came. Not the tide, that was still decades away, but a remnant of the old galaxy. The Kravak Horde, a nomadic swarm of raiders that had plagued the Outer Rim for centuries, decided to test the weakened Dominion. They had heard rumors of the dying star and sensed blood. They arrived in the Othri system with a fleet of 10,000 jagged, rusted warships, expecting to find a crumbling empire. High Archon Valles stood on the bridge of the Othri's Prime, the flagship of the new fleet. Beside him stood Ambassador Thorn, and on the tactical display, human and Ethelgard icons mingled in a unified formation. They hail us, Sub-Overseer Nix reported. They demand our surrender. They say the Ethelgard are old and toothless. Valles looked at Thorn. Shall we show them the history we have made? Thorn nodded, lights on. Valles keyed the comms. This is High Archon Valles of the United Terran Ethelgard Alliance. You are trespassing in protected space. Disarm and power down or be removed. The Kravak warlord laughed over the channel. Alliance, you ally with pets, we will strip the flesh from your bones. The horde surged forward, a tidal wave of missiles and plasma fire. Engage phase defense, Valles ordered calmly. In perfect synchronization, the allied fleet vanished. Not into warp, but into a phase shift, stepping slightly out of sync with reality. The Kravak fire passed harmlessly through the ghostly images of the ships. Then, the fleet rematerialized right in the center of the horde formation. Deploy gravity wells, Thorn suggested. The human-designed, Ethelgard-built generators spun up. Localized gravity spikes erupted within the Kravak formation. Enemy ships were yanked T. Ojdher colliding in massive fireballs, crushed by their own mass. It wasn't a battle, it was a physics demonstration. The Ethelgard gunners, using human targeting AI, fired with surgical precision, disabling engines and weapons without destroying the ships entirely. Within 10 minutes, the Kravak fleet was a smoking ruin of drifting hulks. Cease fire, Valles ordered. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not the fearful silence of the past. It was the silence of absolute competence. The Kravaks surrendered unconditionally. They had expected a fight. They had encountered a force of nature. Later, as Valles and Thorn walked through the grand chamber, now bustling with human and alien aides, Valles stopped by the viewport. The stars looked different now. They didn't look like cold, distant lights. They looked like a frontier. The tide is coming, Valles said, looking at the dark patch of sky between the galaxies. It is, Thorn agreed, and it will be terrible. They said we would never change, Valles murmured. They said the Ethelgard were stone, incapable of bending without breaking. They said humans were too volatile to be trusted. They said this, us, would never happen. Thorn smiled, that strange, baring of teeth that Valles had come to interpret as hope. They say a lot of things, Valles, but we're not listening to them anymore. We're writing the story now. Valles placed a hand on the glass. He thought of the billions of lives across the Dominion, now safe, now learning, now looking up at the sky with wonder instead of fear. He thought of the human children running through the gardens of the capital, playing with young Ethelgard hatchlings. He thought of the sheer, impossible audacity of these hairless apes who looked into the abyss and decided to build a bridge across it. Yes, Valles said, his voice echoing with the weight of a new era. Let the tide come. Let the darkness try to swallow us. We have ignited a new fire here, Elia's thorn, and I do not think it will be easily extinguished. The camera of history pulled back, leaving the two figures silhouetted against the burning glory of the rejuvenated sun. Behind them, the galaxy turned, vast and indifferent, but no longer lonely. The Alliance stood as a testament to the one variable the universe had not accounted for, the stubborn, illogical, beautiful power of friendship between the monster and the myth. The scene shifted one last time, deep into the void, to the listening post the humans had found. A screen, dusty and ancient, flickered to life, triggered by the energy surge of the saved star. Text scrolled across it in a language long dead, translating slowly into the binary of the Ethelgard and the lexicon of Terra. Signal received. Integrity VERIFID. The experiment is a success. The children have found each other. Initiating protocol, awakening. Deep beneath the crust of Othries and deep beneath the oceans of Earth, ancient machines, buried since the dawn of time, began to hum. They were not weapons, they were engines. The planets themselves were the arcs, and the Alliance was the key. The tide would not find a meal, it would find a fortress. And as the combined fleets of the Alliance moved to intercept the encroaching dark, the galaxy held its breath, not in fear, but in anticipation. They said it would never happen. But as the first combined volley of human creativity and Ethelgard might lit up the intergalactic void, shattering the vanguard of the entropy swarm, it became clear to every sentient being watching. History wasn't something that happened to you. History was something you made, usually by doing the one thing everyone said was impossible. The humans and the Ethelgard charged into the dark, and for the first time in the history of the universe, the dark flinched. The end was not an end, but a beginning. The mystery of the awakening lay ahead, a challenge for the next generation of the Alliance. But in that moment, amidst the wreckage of the Kravak and the glow of the saved sun, there was only the profound realization of unity. The terrifying, underestimated humans had not conquered the galaxy with fire. They had conquered it with a handshake. And the Ethelgard, the ancient statues of the stars, had learned to dance. Together they faced the infinite, and the infinite blinked. The screen faded to black, leaving only the sound of a steady, rhythmic heartbeat, two hearts beating as one. End transmission.